Welcome to Pat's Cast. The Patriots just wrapped up day 10. Is it day 10 already of training camp as they head toward the middle of the week in their joint practices with the Washington Commanders and, of course, the preseason game against the Commanders on Friday. Full pads, over 2 hours of work, very red zone heavy session, and safe to say the defense mostly dominated today. And that's kind of been the theme since we last checked in on this podcast. But before I get to that, some kind of off-the-field news about injuries. One to a player and one, I guess you could say an injury, a health scare with defensive coordinator Terrell Williams. He missed a large portion of time away from the facility throughout the offseason dealing with a health issue. Well, he left practice today with dehydration. Apparently he's fine, but a little bit of a scare there with defensive coordinator Terrell Williams. We know he's going through a lot. He left practice on a cart about 2/3 of the way through. I guess it is related to his medical issue, but he is dehydrated, so hopefully he'll be back out there for tomorrow's practice. But, prayers up for Terrell Williams. Hope he's doing well. And, I think he is, assuming he's back 100% and healthy, he's going to surprise us quite a bit as a defensive coordinator with the work that he did with the Detroit Lions, the work that he did previously with Mike Vrabel in Tennessee. You really want Williams to be out there because this is a guy who should have had a defensive coordinator job a long time ago, and I think he's going to do an excellent job if he's back out there this year. Then another injury, the Patriots DBs. The roster keeps getting smaller there. We know they lost Christian Gonzalez to a hamstring injury. I think he's going to be fine, but there's no reason to rush him back for that. You want him healthy week one. Of course, Carlton Davis, no real idea what's going on with him. Been missing pretty much every practice. I think he was out there briefly in week one. Might just be a workload thing since he is a veteran in the league. But no Carlton Davis. And today they lost Marcellus Dial to a leg injury that looks like it could be potentially pretty serious. So Marcellus Dial went down today and was carted off the field. And this is one of those injuries where you don't know if it's serious, you don't know if it's not. But considering he was carted off and it's a leg injury, it could be a knee injury as well. Dial is a guy who, at least with Gonzalez out, with Carlton Davis out, you'd hope would be a contributor there on defense throughout the rest of training camp. Well, it's basically Alex Austin and Marcus Jones and people who probably won't even make the roster. So tough loss today with Marcellus Dial. Hopefully it's not too bad of an injury, but ultimately, once Christian Gonzalez is back and Carlton Davis, then you have Austin and Marcus Jones in the mix. That's a pretty good core of defensive backs, but once you start losing people, this is what you get. You just have Alex Austin and Marcus Jones at this point. And Marcellus Dial, I was impressed with him with the limited playing time he had as a rookie, and you expect him to take a year or two leap, especially with better coaching this year. But as of right now, the receivers should be playing well because they're not going up against very heavy competition, even though I like Alex Austin and I like Marcus Jones, and I think they're above average cornerbacks, but the receivers need to do a better job, and the offense struggled once again today. So back up to Friday night, the Patriots had their game simulation or whatever you call it in the stadium, open to the public. White team, blue team. Drake Maye was on the blue team with Stephon Diggs and company. Was a bit of a shootout between him and backup Josh Dobbs' team. Dobbs' team ultimately ended up winning, and Maye played pretty well through the first half, but then really struggled at the end, throwing 2 late interceptions, including a game-clinching one for the white team when he was picked off on what would have been a pick six to Alex Austin, but he ultimately slid before reaching the end zone to I guess, run out the clock in a practice and give the victory to the white team. So Drake Maye didn't do so great on Friday, and today he started off hot, and then when it came down to real low red zone clutch situations, he struggled quite a bit, and that's been the theme offensively since Friday, since the last time, as I mentioned, I checked in on this podcast. I would say the defense has been better than the offense for the most part throughout training camp, but it's been close to 50-50, but the last couple of practices, it really has been the defense dominating out there. Drake Maye today in team periods went 10 of 21 passing with 3 touchdowns, and he did have a scramble. So far, he's taken 19 sacks throughout training camp through 10 days of practices. Thrown 2 interceptions, both happened on Friday, and he's 72 of 113. Now, a lot of the work they've done, including today, was red zone work, so your completion percentage is not going to be super high when you're doing red zone work and you have less space to work with. So overall, 72 of 113 isn't terrible throughout all of training camp, but today Drake Maye did struggle quite a bit toward the end. Did perform very well, though, as I said, in about the first half of practice. They started off in the high red zone, so, within the 20-25 yard line. And then they moved down to the low red zone, and that's where the defense really began to dominate with, less than 10 yards to work with, not a lot of space, and the offense struggled quite a bit. But high red zone, Drake Maye did very well. 8 of 10, had 2 touchdown passes to Travion Henderson, who has been kind of quiet so far in the last few practices, but today in training camp, excellent job there by Travion Henderson. Not just as a running back, but as a pass catcher. One of those came on one of those classic halfback wheel routes. Touchdown to Henderson there, had a double move running the football. Drake Maye also threw another touchdown pass to Demario Douglas. And then, like I said, struggled in the low red zone. Those were mainly end-of-game scenarios, 20-25 yard line, 45 seconds left in the game. He went just 2 of 10 in 3 final team periods, and he missed 5 different targets, 5 different throws. So the accuracy has been spotty for Drake Maye throughout camp, particularly on the short passes. He's a weird guy. Drake Maye is a weird quarterback. Throwing the ball 40, 50 yards downfield, doesn't matter if he's in the pocket, he's scrambling, throwing on the run. One of the most accurate passers I've ever seen at throwing those deep shots. Very accurate in the intermediate, but then when it comes to the short game, when you get into the low red zone, or when you need to dink and dunk it, throw quick slants, all that stuff that we know Tom Brady thrived at, that's where Drake Maye's struggles have really surfaced recently. And it's a similar problem that the Patriots had with Joe Milton last year. Remember, Joe Milton can really only throw a 60-mile-an-hour fastball on all of his throws. So, long, intermediate throws, excellent quarterback, but then he would throw rockets 5 yards down the field and just hit the receiver right in the chest. Drake Maye, it's not quite to that extent. Drake Maye has a nice touch on his throw. He throws the football in multiple ways, but the short passing is a bit of a struggle, and that is a very important part of Josh McDaniels' offense, taking the profit, taking the check down, hitting the primary receiver, even if they're not the one running a vertical route. If it's a quick slant, you hit them because they're the primary receiver, and you're setting up the offense, and you're setting up the rest of the receivers to give them space to move with the football yards after catch. Drake Maye has not done the best job with that so far, and we saw that in today's practice. But overall, it's nothing to panic about with Drake Maye. He's picked up the Josh McDaniels offense. He's taken command of it. There hasn't been the, center QB fumble exchanges that we saw early on in training camp, at least the last few practices. So, we know he stepped into a leadership role. He's great downfield. He's a great dual threat quarterback. Just has some things to work on as a second-year guy. But overall, his highlight pass of the day outside of the wheel route to Travion Henderson, threw a 4th down touchdown to Kayshon Boutte on a 14-yard heave to the right pylon. Questionable whether it was in bounds or not, but it was ultimately ruled a touchdown pass over DJ James, who's having a hell of a camp, but Kayshon Boutte beat him. And then Kayshon Boutte, of course, is just, he has to be in that starting lineup with the way he's played throughout all of camp. Not the biggest splash plays, but body control, probably the best on the team of all the receivers, and he does what you ask of him, and he has managed to pick up the Josh McDaniels offense. He's really matured a lot as a player, so Kayshon Boutte, you can't keep him off the roster. You can't even keep him out of the starting lineup at this point, in my opinion, although Mac Hollins may disagree with that. Maye also hit Hunter Henry a couple of times, 2 intermediate routes. One came on a touchdown over Kyle Duggar, who seems to be working his way backward on the depth chart. Hit Demario Douglas twice underneath and Stephon Diggs on a screen out route. But some of the low points, as I mentioned, Drake Maye had a tip pass at the line. He let Stephon Diggs go out of bounds in the red zone before throwing the football to him. There was also a play where he could have hit Javon Baker and it went too high. So, still showed some poise, but could not sustain the early magic that Drake Maye was showing at the beginning portion of practice. So, they're going to be working on the low red zone quite a bit because that's really where the offense has struggled mostly throughout training camp. They do need to do more midfield work. They did a little bit end of last week since we did the podcast, but it seems like that is the biggest concern, and that's part of the reason the team continues to work in the red zone. That was always an important part of Josh McDaniels' offense, but there seems to be an even greater emphasis on the low red zone this training camp than I've seen in the last, 2 decades at Patriots training camp. Josh Dobbs actually had a pretty decent practice, 7 of 12 with 2 touchdown passes. One went to Javon Baker, the other went to Efton Chisholm. I had 2 scrambles. He also accounted for 3 sacks. So, solid performance by Josh Dobbs. Hopefully, he's picking up the offense a little bit better. He's been all around the league, and that's not really a good thing as a veteran in Josh McDaniels' offense because you have so many things to compare it to, and it is so unique. But Josh Dobbs, the struggles that we were seeing early in camp where I was saying, maybe he shouldn't be the backup, maybe he should be the third string guy, he looks like more of a backup, at least as of right now, and played pretty well in Friday's practice as his team ultimately won, beating Drake Maye's blue team. As for the offensive line, Garrett Bradbury is back out there. So I think this is going to be your starting lineup, week 1. Will Campbell, of course, at left tackle. Jared Wilson, he's going to be in that starting lineup. The question is it going to be at left guard or at center? He's been taking mostly reps recently at the left guard spot. He started there today. Garrett Bradbury, of course, at the center spot now that he's back and healthy. Michael Wenu quietly having a pretty good training camp. Conditioning doesn't seem to be an issue. Back at right guard. And then Morgan Moses, the veteran that they brought in through free agency at the right tackle spot. That was your starting lineup today. And I think that will probably be your starting lineup come early September. Moses didn't finish practice. There were some concerns that it was an injury. But I think it's just they're managing his workload. He's 34 years old, and he's on a 3-year contract. So Patriots are going to take it easy with him. Marcus Bryant actually came in to take the final reps at the right tackle spot for Morgan Moses and not Demontre Jacobs. So that's good to see. Marcus Bryant, the guy that they drafted in the late rounds, huge tackle. Has a lot to work on in terms of fundamentals. I'm not super comfortable with Demontre Jacobs out there, even as a backup. So if Marcus Bryant is going to be the backup of the right tackle spot, and he's earned that role, I'm feeling pretty good about that. It's also worth noting he was limited in practice, so not a lot to talk about, but Vidarian Lowe was back out there, and I know we all roll our eyes at Vidarian Lowe, but he's a pretty solid NFL backup at the left tackle spot. He was better last year than I think any of us expected. Not great, far from great, but Vidarian Lowe as a backup left tackle, if Will Campbell goes down, I'm comfortable with that. So if you got Vidarian Lowe as the backup tackle spot on the left side and Marcus Bryant earns the spot on the right side, I'm pretty happy with that. We know the offensive line is the biggest red flag unit on this team. So, and part of that is just the depth at the tackle positions. We don't know who's ultimately going to be the backups there. I think it will be Vidarian Lowe, and hopefully Marcus Bryant earns that job. Because again, Demontre Jacobs, let's be honest, he's been around the league. He's had a good career. Probably shouldn't be on an NFL roster for a good team. So if he can't make the cut, that is a good sign that they figured out the depth question there at the tackle position. Jared Wilson, who's been dominant throughout training camp, actually had a rare off day today. Took 2 bad one-on-one losses to Christian Barmore and Milton Williams today. He did play center a little. Again, he's mostly at the left guard spot. But when he was at center, he accounted for 2 run stuffs in a hurry during team drills. So, again, he's going to be a starter. He's really been the pleasant surprise on the entire roster throughout training camp. I think they're far more comfortable with him at left guard. Maybe eventually he'll be your starting center of the future. But so far, it seems like Jared Wilson has shored up that left guard spot, which raises the question, what happens with Cole Strange? Talked about it on the last podcast. A bit of an enigma. They gave him some reps as the third string at the center spot behind Ben Brown last week. Now you have Garrett Bradbury back, so does he move even further back? Does he still compete for the left guard spot? Well, today, he moved to the backup center spot, so he leapfrogged Ben Brown, or I guess he leapfrogged Ben Brown. Ben Brown actually took reps today at the left guard spot, which is questionable. I guess he has experience there, but he's not the most athletic offensive lineman, so you kind of want him at the center spot. I also thought he did an okay job last year. But you had Ben Brown as a backup at left guard, and then Cole Strange as the second string backup to the center position. And, he's okay. He didn't do much last year at the center spot. He actually struggled quite a bit. He did fail to pick up on a stunt that forced Josh Dobbs to scramble. But right now, it doesn't look like Cole Strange is going to be in that starting lineup. Really, that has everything to do with Jared Wilson, and I think less to do with Cole Strange. But, last week we were talking, is there going to be a roster spot for him? If he's backing up at both of those positions, there will definitely be a spot for Cole Strange. But he did look pretty good today in one-on-one reps. Shut down Isaiah Aiton on one of the one-on-one reps, and I believe he won the other one as well. So Cole Strange, he's fighting, he's competing, he's trying to earn a roster spot and keep his NFL career going, frankly. But as of right now, he's on the outside of the starting lineup looking in, so he's just fighting for a backup job. Some other notes, Morgan Moses went unbeaten in one-on-ones. Vidarian Lowe, again, he was limited today, but he went 2-1 in one-on-ones as a third-string left tackle. So, he's getting some physical action out there, Vidarian Lowe, in the one-on-ones. We'll see if they kind of work him in with Josh Dobbs a little bit more in team periods as the week progresses. So that's the offensive line. As for the receivers, Demario Douglas continues to lead the team in targets throughout training camp. Far more targets than even Stephon Diggs is getting. He's been frankly, Stephon Diggs has been the third best receiver in training camp. It has been Demario Douglas and Kayshon Boutte at the top. Probably Demario Douglas is number one. He went 3 of 5 today in team drills. I mentioned he caught a touchdown pass from Drake Maye and 2 underneath throws, beating Alex Austin and DJ James. He's been super consistent, which is everything you want in Josh McDaniels' offense. With the slot receiver, you need consistency there, and Demario Douglas has been that guy. Kayshon Boutte, again, had a 14-yard touchdown grab on fourth down. He's competing right now for the starting job at the X-receiver slot with Mac Hollins. Mac Hollins did jump in with the starting group, but they are respecting Kayshon Boutte and putting him out there with the starters just by the way that he's performed. And Hollins didn't have a great day. He went 0 for 2, and then with a drop in the one-on-one periods. So he's going to be in the mix for that X-receiver role. Maybe we're overhyping who's out there in the starting lineup. We've seen this with Patriots receivers before. Whether that is Diggs, Douglas, and Boutte, or Diggs, Douglas, and Hollins, or you mix Kyle Williams in there, who's also competing for the X spot, and then Kendrick Bourne. I think you're going to have 6 very active receivers that get consistent playing time week to week, and it's all going to depend on the matchups, right? Who they're going against that week. That's just the way Josh McDaniels schemes it up. Mike Vrabel is a week to week coach. You're going to see very different things week to week. So I think you're going to see different receivers out there in that starting lineup. But another quiet day for Stephon Diggs, who showed quite a few flashes early on in training camp, but just isn't being targeted a lot. And, he's getting catches and doing what he needs to do, but we're not seeing the big wide receiver number 1 splashes that you would expect from a Stephon Diggs. And you would expect that he would be more dominant as training camp progressed since he's coming back from an injury, but maybe it's just Drake Maye spreading the football around, letting other receivers get their shot. That way, Stephon Diggs He's going to be out there in the starting lineup. He's going to be on the roster. Give the other guys a little bit of a chance. But Diggs went 2 of 3 today in team drills, caught a screen and an out route. And of course, there was the target in the tight red zone where Drake Maye basically threw him out of bounds. So we just haven't seen a ton of splash plays from Stephon Diggs. But Diggs is one of those guys where it's like, you get him out there in a regular season NFL game, he's going to make those plays. So I'm not too worried about it. I'm glad to see the other receivers getting their shot, like Javon Baker, who's certainly had his ups and downs. He went 1 of 3 in team drills, mostly playing with Josh Dobbs. Did catch a touchdown pass from Dobbs, and he was pretty good in 7-on-7s today, very briefly. And, Javon Baker, you can probably stash him on the practice squad. As of right now, that's likely to be what ends up happening. Jalen Polk, who was drafted ahead of him in the second round last year, was very dominant today in one-on-ones. Look at the clips on X. I wouldn't say he's actually a pretty good route runner. He's just not great off the line of scrimmage, but decent hands for the most part. But this is what we saw last year in training camp from Jalen Polk. Dominating in one-on-ones, doing an okay job in team periods. He was pretty quiet today in team periods. I think he only had one target from Josh Dobbs, but maybe they just keep Polk to give him another shot because you drafted him early last year for a reason, and you hope he has a roster spot, and you still have Elliott Wolf sticking around, and that's going to be a massive red mark on Elliott Wolf's resume, of which there are many red marks from last year's draft. So we'll see what happens. Efton Chisholm, of course, still fighting to get a roster spot. I think he will, just as a special teamer, but, he had a one-handed touchdown grab on a throw from Josh Dobbs today in the red zone. Got incredible hands, but he did have a rare drop, I think, today, and then 2 targets were also batted away from Efton Chisholm. So the size, the physicality, the lack of speed, even though he's very quick, are concerns with Efton Chisholm. The issue with Efton Chisholm is you already have Demario Douglas, right? If you didn't have Demario Douglas as your bread and butter slot receiver, Efton Chisholm could win that job, like, right now. I really, truly believe that. And that's why I think it's worth keeping him around. The problem is, you're going to have Demario Douglas, presumably for many, many more years. Hopefully you re-sign him, and he's on this team for a while. How do you work another small, undersized slot receiver like Efton Chisholm into the rotation? Josh McDaniels has done stuff like that plenty, but, you got Stephon Diggs, who's not the biggest receiver. You got Douglas, who's obviously small. Efton Chisholm, even smaller. I don't know if he's even smaller, but small receiver. Kyle Williams can play the X, but he's not a big guy. Really, the biggest X-type receivers that you have out there are Kayshon Boutte, who's, he's not exactly 6'6", and Mac Hollins, who does have some size to him and can play the X role. You have too many undersized receivers, so it's really hard to see what the future looks like for Efton Chisholm with all the competition that he has with this receiving core, all the young players in this receiving core, even 2 to 3 seasons down the road. Hopefully they keep him around. Hopefully he's on the roster on special teams, because someone will pluck him away if you try to stash him on the practice squad. So he's done everything you've asked of him so far throughout camp. It's just such a crowded receiving room right now. I don't know if there's going to be a spot for him outside of special teams as a contributor, unless, there's a series of injuries. But yeah, going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Kyle Williams went quiet today, 0 for 2 in team drills. And, he's fighting for he's going to make the roster. He's fighting for a spot in the starting lineup. But he just has not been consistent throughout camp. And how many rookie receivers are we going to bring into Foxborough that are inconsistent? Kyle Williams has been that way. And, hopefully he's different than the rest of these guys coming in. But right now you got Douglas, Diggs, Boutte, Hollins, all ahead of Kyle Williams on the depth chart. And then Kendrick Bourne, if he sticks around, if they don't trade him or cut him, he might be ahead of Kyle Williams just because of his experience He's worked in the Josh McDaniels offense before. But Kendrick Bourne was out today. So, I don't know. I'm not sure there even is a spot for Kendrick Bourne. So that's it for the offense. On the defensive side, again, they dominated late in the low red zone periods, holding Maye to just 20%. His completion percentage, Josh Dobbs just went 2 of 5. They had 3 sacks, 2 from Anthony Jennings, who's having a great camp. Isaiah Aiton also had a sack. DJ James, who I think is going to earn a roster spot, 3 pass breakups. Marcus Jones ripped a touchdown away from Efton Chisholm. Kyrus Tonga had a pass breakup and 2 one-on-one wins over Garrett Bradbury. Also, Kobe Minor and Brandon Crossley, lower down in the depth chart, they also had pass breakups as well. But Anthony Jennings, really doing an excellent job out there. He also had a run stuff today. Christian Barmore had a sack and a pressure. He's getting worked in a lot more. Also been doing a lot of sideline work, one-on-one with Mike Vrabel, which is great to see. The defense, assuming you have Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis out there, I'm not that worried about the defense. Now, Micah Parsons, of course, is asking for a trade right now. Patriots are one of the few teams that can make that type of deal and bring in, probably the second best edge rusher in the NFL. Bring him in, sign him to a long-term contract extension, and that's the kind of guy that Mike Vrabel would love. I know we're all talking about a trade with the Washington Commanders for Terry McLaurin. I know that would be great, but you got a pretty decent receiver room right now. A lot of competition. You don't want to throw that off with Terry McLaurin at 30 years old. I would love Terry McLaurin. If they make that trade, I'd be very happy. But I would much prefer bringing in a real impact game changer like Micah Parsons, adding him to the defensive line. And now suddenly you go from, I think the Patriots probably have a top 5 defense, but then you basically guarantee you have the best defense in the league right off the bat and take a lot of pressure off the offense. That's something I really hope the Patriots will consider. Jerry Jones, once again, dropping the ball on not re-signing his veteran players outside of offensive positions like he did with, CeeDee Lamb and, of course, Dak Prescott. He signed Zeke Elliott to a long-term deal, which, of course, was a mistake. Not signing the defensive players, fine. I think the Patriots, I would gladly have them trade a first-round draft pick, even if, the Patriots aren't as good as we think, and they're in the top 10 again next year. Hard to replace a guy like Micah Parsons, add him to your roster, and suddenly Patriots have the best defense in the league. I hope they will consider it, and I'm sure they're having those conversations, but Parsons and Dallas, they have some things they need to work out. Parsons tweeted that he's requesting a trade, so I don't know. We see how these things often play out, and eventually the two sides, they argue, they whine, they moan, and then they come together and sign to a contract extension. So if I had to guess right now, Micah Parsons is probably going to stay with Dallas, but I hope if the Patriots are serious, they should go after a player like that who, he spends 5-6 years in New England. He's a Patriots Hall of Famer. Like, he's that good. So, love to see it, but we'll see how it ultimately plays out. Some other notes, running back position today. Again, Travion Henderson had arguably his best practice so far throughout training camp on 2 touchdown catches and a rushing touchdown as well. Ramondre Stevenson saw some second-team reps because he fumbled in Friday's scrimmage. Vrabel doesn't like fumbles, although he downplayed it quite a bit when he was asked about it. But we know Stevenson had 7 fumbles last year, and he seemed to be downgraded, at least temporarily, on the depth chart because of it. Antonio Gibson led the team with 8 carries, was stuffed once, but he's holding his own out there. And then Lan Larison, the guy that they brought in undrafted, didn't get any reps or didn't get any touches. So he's fighting for a roster spot. But Lan Larison, he's pretty good from everything that I've read. So, you're not going to beat out Henderson, Stevenson, or Gibson. But if that's the 4th running back on your depth chart, they're in a good spot. So as I mentioned, a few other notes. Kyle Duggar getting less and less first-team reps, which means they're giving them to rookie Craig Woodson. Duggar allowed 2 catches in team periods. This is definitely something to watch. I've never been super high on Kyle Duggar. When the Patriots made all those offseason moves last year, re-signing players, I said Kyle Duggar was the one guy I would let go. He just is not consistent enough. Often in the wrong place defensively, and Mike Vrabel is seeing that. And Craig Woodson has had a pretty good camp so far, and it's possible that we see Woodson out there instead of Duggar. Talking about trade block guys, Kyle Duggar, very strong reputation around the league. You might be able to get something back for him. Or maybe Micah Parsons, you're not going to go 1-for-1 there, but you throw Kyle Duggar in a draft pick. Then you can maybe get Micah Parsons. I think he's decent trade bait at this point. K'Lavon Chaisson did not participate. He has 6 sacks so far throughout training camp. So the edge rush didn't have the juice it has in recent practices. But Jennings, of course, had a decent practice. And then Jaden Swinson, the guy they brought in from LSU, Will Campbell's teammate, he's been a little bit inconsistent throughout camp. So that's what's going on there. On special teams, Parker Romo and Andy Borregales both went 4-for-4 today from 33, 43, 49, and 54 yards. So that is a real competition, and they've both been perfect in recent practices. So it's going to come down to the wire. It might come down to the preseason games. You bring them in there in real game situation. Whoever misses a kick doesn't make the roster. I think that's what might end up happening. Obviously, I think the Patriots are going to favor Andy Borregales since they drafted him, and nobody expected Parker Romo to be the go-to guy, but Borregales has been underwhelming, and Parker Romo has been a pleasant surprise. So, real competition there. I'm not confident in either kicker, to be honest. I'd rather have Nick Folk back out there, but, you need a guy who can kick from 50-plus yards, and Nick Folk just wasn't that guy, and they may not be as accurate, but Parker Romo and Borregales both got pretty strong legs, so going to be fun to see how that ultimately plays out. Some other news, of course, the Washington Commanders are coming to Foxborough for a joint practice on Wednesday, and they will face off against the Patriots in their first preseason game on Friday. And Tom Brady's statue will be unveiled that day. They finally worked it out with Brady being able to come back to New England. I don't know how many of these ceremonies we're going to have. They've been a bit excessive as much as I love Tom Brady. But that will be fun to see, and hopefully this isn't a Dwayne Wade situation or a Ronaldo situation where they reveal the statue and they just look at it like, that looks like some alien from another planet. Hopefully that's not the case, and Robert Kraft actually put in some real money there. But it's going to be a 12-foot statue, appropriately, for Tom Brady, number 12. And once again, that will be unveiled before Friday's preseason game. So, long story short, Travion Henderson had a good practice. Drake Maye started off hot, did not play well late, missed a lot of throws. On the defensive end, we saw DJ James dominate. He continues to break up a lot of passes. You don't have K'Lavon Chaisson, but the defense continued to dominate in the low red zone. And Kyle Duggar seems to be potentially on the outs, which I think if you have a smart head coach is ultimately the right decision. But I like Kyle Duggar. I really do. How many times last season, the season before, were you like, oh yeah, Duggar he got fooled by the misdirection, was in the wrong spot. Like, how many times do we have to go over that? If Craig Woodson is doing the job, I'd much rather have him cheaper player, young player, have him long term, instead of Kyle Duggar, trade him away, get a draft pick, or throw him in a deal for a big player like Micah Parsons or Terry McLaurin if the Patriots could swing it. But, let me know what you think about the offense in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube. And be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell, or subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'll be back on Wednesday following the joint practice between the Patriots and the Commanders. And, of course, we'll be back on Friday after that for the Patriots' first preseason game. All the analysis coming out of that. We'll see you then.